Welcome everyone. In this slideshow I'll cover a few details on my AC 2 litre restoration that don't fit into other categories. Starting with the number plates. For viewers outside the UK, I should explain that the registration number carried usually stays with each car for its lifetime, although they can be changed. An issue I've observed at car meetings is that some cars have lost their original plates and now have modern fonts and no longer embossed like you can see on mine. My front plate is an aluminium sheet with individual characters attached. I think they are made from an early polystyrene. The corner of the letter R was broken off and part of the letter N was cracked. I attempted to glue them together with reinforcements using a suitable polystyrene cement, but the repairs broke easily. I've left them for now as the separate pieces are securely attached to the plate. The plate itself was very battered as it's in a vulnerable position on the bumper. As a small child I recall my dad driving into a large stone planted in the ground at a stately home. After straightening out I've painted it with black coat paint. The rear number plate is more interesting. It is backlit and the individual characters are made from a translucent resin under the Bakelite trade name. Bakelite can refer to various types of synthetic resin. The problem here is that there are thin metal sheets folded over each character and riveted on. I did not dare remove these and decided to very delicately clean, prepare and repaint the metal. Some were of steel and some were aluminium. Despite being so careful, I got some dirt on the white resin. I couldn't manage to clean it off until I learned that one should use bleach, which seems obvious on reflection. I used black coat paint again, applied with an artist brush. The supporting frame was a bit rusty but good enough to salvage. The two lamp holders needed repainting white. The old perspex cover was well and truly crazed, so I cut out a new one. There are tiny distance pieces that go under each of the 6 wood screws, creating a gap between the plate and the perspex. The finishing touch was a new rubber seal around the perspex. This was rubber tubing that I slitted lengthways. Next on the agenda was the window and windscreen frames. These are chrome-plated brass. AC kept updating the way they fixed the windscreen into the car, evidently having problems along the way. The version on my car has tiny brass angle brackets. Surprisingly, these appear to have been made by folding strips of brass with a very tight bend. Some of these are broken and others are cracked. They are soldered on and also held with the tiny 4BA screw. I made new ones, also from brass strip, but this time thicker strip and keeping the bend radius as large as possible within the space available. I test fitted the wood trim over them to be sure. The fixed side windows had similar brackets, but amazingly the rear brackets had never been installed. There was evidence that the brackets had broken, but the wood frame on the car shows that they were never fitted from new. They must have broken during assembly in the factory. While I've admired the design work that went into the AC, the quality of the assembly has some shortcomings. In AC's defence, they were struggling to keep the car's price below a critical tax threshold that eventually sent the car's price tag soaring. The side window frames have these steel corner brackets. The 2 lower ones were rusted beyond repair, so I cut new ones from scraps of angle iron and painted with epoxy. The seal for the glass is felt, or rather 3 sections of felt that allow rainwater to get through the corners. I'll make sure that the new ones fit more tightly, or see if it's possible to make it from one piece. I will attend to that after the frames have been replated. Dealing with the windscreen was more challenging. There are steel brackets securing the 2 halves with steel 4BA screws that were mostly rusted. I drilled out the worst ones. Then there was the small matter of removing the glass panes from each frame. Firstly, note that tempered glass can explode if you break it without a frame to constrain it. I was careful where I stood. There is a thin rubber channel seal around the glass. The bottom right hand corner of the screen always used to leak rainwater onto Dad's lap, and then in later years onto my lap. I'd assumed that this was due to the old rubber seal. Can you guess the real reason for the leakage? The glass panes had been cut too small, and the corner of the glass did not go into the brass channel. The frames spring outwards when released, so it's a case of very carefully prising the frame away from the glass edges until you can gently ease it out. I plan to fit stainless steel 4BA screws when the time comes to reassemble. Since the glass panes are undersize, I plan to ask Pilkington if they can make new laminated screens. If you make the change to laminated, then they need to be the correct type for a car screen. If you are in North America and wondering why I have tempered glass, that's because America phased in laminated glass screens many years before the UK and other countries. Although I'm doing my own electroplating for small parts, I'm going to get these larger components done professionally. There are a couple of non-original details I added without vandalising any original parts. Firstly, a pair of bonnet props. AC had originally designed a rear hinge bonnet with a rather nice system using a lever built into A-ridge on the mascot. The bonnet was spring-loaded for easy opening and closing. It must have given trouble because after 10 or so cars built in 1947, they changed to this more primitive central bonnet hinge. Each bonnet half can be opened one at a time. Unfortunately, the cast bracket at the front of the hinge is not strong enough, and these broke, resulting in the bonnet having to fold back on itself when opened. I bought a new bracket from Pullbeck Vintage Supplies, and its base is a bit thicker, but I decided to do what many owners have done and add props. The easiest way to attach the prop without drilling any new holes was to make a bracket and bolt it under the bonnet catch. I made the bracket from aluminium angle girder. I then put in an old style Lucas grommet. Then I made the prop from a length of 1/4 inch, or about 6mm, diameter mild steel rod. I cut a thread on the end and fitted a nylock nut. Now one can have both sides open at the same time. Another small detail is cool air ventilation. The two worst things about driving the AC back in the 1980s were the windscreen wipers and the lack of cool air. The wipers are now 2-speed. On a hot day my feet would get roasted. Even the 1949 road testers commented on the heat in the footwell. Part of the problem on my AC was all the gaps around the floorboards, which was easy to resolve. Also, the dead-end silencers on the exhaust manifold release a lot of heat. Some owners get rid of them. I might try and make removable insulating covers, as the heat is very welcome in the winter. The other problem here is the lack of any fresh air ventilation other than opening windows. AC later added adjustable vents at knee level. I managed to work out how to get a ventilation duct around the edge of the floor panel near the driver's right foot. I considered making a flexible pipe ducting to pick up cool air from the front of the car and maybe even add an inline fan. For now I decided to make this primitive duct to scoop air on the move, and I will experiment when the car is on the road and develop it from there. And some good news from late last year. I found a replacement for my missing Merlin Garrington spanner for the toolkit in the correct period style. I found it on eBay. And finally, going off at a tangent, have you ever wondered about what makes people love or hate body styling? You might think it's all subjective, and it is, but the curious thing is how current trends seem to dictate personal taste. I've always been besotted with the AC since I was a preschool child. In the 1940s, the magazines gushed over the AC's beauty. In a 1958 second-hand car tester was less happy with the style. When I ran my AC in the 1980s, opinions were highly polarised, but with only a minority sharing my taste. Putting that into context, most people hated the Morris Minor, P4 Rover, and any other early post-war car. Fast forward to 2009 when I revived my restoration work. I lived near several schools, and the children and teenagers went wild over the AC, and some teenage girls rushed up to take photos. Passing bus drivers stopped to admire it. Some of my car-hating railway enthusiast friends found it was love at first sight when they saw it. What a turnaround. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.